The push is now on for Sydney to be transformed into a metropolis. That means high-density living, more urban consolidation along existing transport corridors. How dense? Well, one clue comes with proposals for 100,000 new apartments along the corridor from the Sydney CBD to Parramatta. But this strip is already dense and gridlocked. This week, the O'Farrell government announced there's to be a new compulsory acquisition authority to be called Urban Growth New South Wales, to merge Landcom and the Sydney Metropolitan Development Authority under the chairmanship of former opposition leader John Brogden. Metropolis Sydney is now clearly on the agenda, critics or no critics. Remember at the state election, the O'Farrell coalition proposed 50-50 for Greater Sydney's development? 50% infill to 50% greenfield sites for new housing?
Be closer to 50 than 70, Quentin, because that's the way I balance things.
It seems that's all about to change. The metropolis is coming. Infill perhaps up to 90%, greenfields perhaps down to 10%. Apartment blocks from 6 storeys to 15 storeys along arterial roads and to 25 storeys at selected sites and over railway stations. On Thursday, a breakfast forum was told the Sydney construction industry is in the doldrums, even with massive unmet housing demand. A capital drought after the GFC and high site development costs and levies have knocked New South Wales way down the performance ladder. But with a state budget announcement of a new urban growth authority and a doubling of the first home buyers grant, the industry seems to have moved the government to take on the coordination of infill housing. The Urban Task Force, representing this state's biggest property and construction developers, is proposing the building of 100,000 new apartments along the Parramatta to Sydney CBD urban corridor. But after years of donor-developer corruption scandals, local communities remain sceptical and suspicious about the motivation of developers, a point acknowledged by Michael Eason, an UrbanRenual property developer and financier who calls for attitudinal change.
It's legitimate for the community to question rapacious developers wanting to screw the public by ugly development, contributing to the ugliness of Parramatta Road. The Heritage Council in 2001 produced a very interesting report about parts of Parramatta Road that ought to be kept in its current form or improved based on the wonderful character of a number of those buildings. So no one here from the development community is asking to tear down the whole corridor.
To try to excite the public imagination with new design concepts, the Urban Task Force's current infill proposals have evolved from architects John Choi and Adrian McGregor's report, sponsored by 11 councils, government and community groups, on the corridor's renewal potential in 2002. But it was never published.
The economic study that was attached to this, that was very thorough, demonstrated that there could be around $50 billion of construction value in the corridor. And out of that, $4 billion through value capture mechanisms could be reinvested for public benefit. So creating new parklands, fixing waterways, building a metro, light rail, all of these wonderful things, creating good communities along the road, all of that could have been funded through those development taxes, if you like.
10 years later, still no kickstart on the corridor's biggest problem, transport infrastructure to end the gridlock. The Keneally government's scrapping of the CBD to Rozelle Metro 3 years ago was a major blow. And there's still no money in this year's O'Farrell government budget for the missing M4 East extension to ease congestion on Parramatta Road.
It's pretty difficult to have a document that represents the 11 councils, the 3 state agencies. We had support from the Property Council of Australia, the Planning Institute of Australia, and community groups such as the Australian Conservation Foundation. So, at one point in time, we had a broad support that could really start to get this moving along, but it was shelved.
The infill proponents have produced this concept plan to stimulate public discussion. Light rail, or trams if you like, they're the yellow lines, would interconnect the 100,000 apartments linking to heavy rail, busways, cycleways, walkways and the existing ferry services on the Parramatta River. But at this stage it's still all talk. Canada Bay Mayor Angela Tarakis says $2.5 billion from developer and other levies could be applied to the corridor's infrastructure. As mayor for 10 years, he has supported high-rise up to 25 storeys at roads and now wants a multi-council coordinated approach to urban renewal.
It's a mindset change for residents in our local government area to have a concept of 25 storeys. Certainly it's a big change from your low, medium density 7 storeys to 25. In fact, we talked about a lot of community benefits that would provide by the small uplift of 400 units in that huge development. So with the discussion with community, talking to them about the benefits, the open space, the community centre, the better planning design, I think that we were able to give them some ease on what that would provide to the community. 25 storeys, but the pluses, the community benefits.
Angela Tarakis' recent political rival, John Sidoti, himself a former mayor of Burwood, is now Liberal member for Drummoyne.
It's always difficult balancing politics and matching community expectation, but the reality is it was marketed terribly. It wasn't marketed in conjunction with public transport. It was marketed as a sustainable, environmentally friendly, relax the parking code. And guess what? The extra car now is parked on the footpath where they've now introduced parking meters. It's been a monumental failure.
Peter Poulet, the government architect, believes the economic benefits and lower greenhouse gas impacts of infill with coordinated public transport are compelling, but only better design could win people over to higher densities.
This is where the demand and growth is occurring, and so we should make sure that the amenity, the quality of the built environment in that area is fantastic for those people.
Uninvited and outside the forum, anti-urban consolidation critic Tony Reesey of Save Our Suburbs says lifestyle preference, cost-effectiveness for housing construction, infill versus greenfield sites, plus environmental impacts should now be rigorously tested before the new Urban Growth Authority signs off on metropolis infill housing. High apartment body corporate fees can also be a trap for unwary consumers, he warns.
Most people, possibly 85%, prefer to live in single residential houses. Very few want to live in units. And as far as I know, the only reason why there is a bit of a market for units now is because the government has clamped down on the release of single residential sites, so they become very expensive and very difficult to get. People have the choice of either paying an enormous amount for a house on the outskirts or an enormous amount for a unit in the middle city.
We're never going to solve affordability, are we?
Oh, we are. All the government need to do is to release more land and the price will just go down.
With that budget initiative to double the first homeowners grant, but only for new houses or units costing up to $650,000, the government's boost to construction is obvious. Infill or greenfields, either way, the biggest headache for the new Urban Growth Authority will be, as ever, transport infrastructure.